Now, our next speaker is a scientist and teacher, a husband and father, whose career is devoted to finding solutions to difficult problems through consensus and common sense. He was elected to the New Jersey Assembly in 2015, the first Democrat ever to win in the 16th district. He currently serves as the chairman of the Assembly's Science, Innovation, and Technology Committee and is a member of the Assembly Committees on Higher Education and Regulated Professions. A lifelong New Jersey resident, he is head of communications and public outreach at Princeton University's Plasma Physics Laboratory, a world leader in developing an advanced form of energy. At the lab, he has worked with hundreds of teachers and students, helping to inspire a new generation of scientists and researchers with the promise of technology that serves society's needs. He has been a faculty advisor for the Princeton University freshmen and sophomores and an academic athletic fellow for the women's soccer team. He taught classes in bioethics and writing and led plasma physics workshops for college faculty, undergraduate students, and advanced high school students. The American Association of Physics Teachers named him as one of the 75 leading contributors to physics education in the US. His love of learning and passion for science came from his mother, a public school English teacher, and father, a chemical engineer. He earned a bachelor's degree in physics from Bard College and a master's and PhD in physics from Johns Hopkins University. Andrew and his wife Barbara, an elementary school educator in Hillsborough, live in Kingston, where they raised 3 children. So, without further ado, speaking about innovation, we have Andrew Zwicker.
Hello,
Hello, Assemblyman.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm in my car, so I wasn't quite sure. Thank you. That was really quite the introduction. I very much appreciate it. What I'd like to do is talk for just a short time about innovation in a couple of different ways, because that word can mean so many different things. And then I'm going to open it up to questions, because I'm happy to answer any and all questions. But as you heard from the introduction, I am a scientist, a teacher, and also a politician. And I heard some of the conversation before, never imagined, I was never part of the future politicians of America. I was never part of the, I want to be a politician. But, part of what it means, in my opinion, to be a leader, part of what it means to be someone who aspires for change or progress or education is to be a risk taker. And risk taking can mean lots of different things. And I think if I use the word risk taking, there's a good chance many of you think about, I don't know, jumping out of an airplane, scuba diving, a physical risk. But I think part of what leadership and innovation means when it comes to leaders is about taking risks that are emotional risks, taking risks that take us way outside of our comfort zone. And so in my case, I decided to take a risk to move, and as you heard from the introduction, I go back and forth between these worlds, to not just in the world of science and teaching, but into the world of politics. I was very frustrated. I was very concerned in 2015 about what I was seeing with the enormous partisan divide. And I had either a level of optimism or perhaps a level of arrogance that was maybe I could do it better. And so I decided to be perhaps take a risk and be innovative and say, why not me? Why not run for office? And so, yeah, you heard that I'm the first physicist, I think it's the first Democrat in my district. It was in a very Republican district. And this is not a partisan statement. It was also a statement of, why are you even doing this? You have no chance of winning. But I said, well, if you can't win if you don't try. So I ended up winning, I ended up becoming the first physicist ever elected in New Jersey's legislative history. But one of my messages for you is on the importance of voting, because in 2015, 34,000 people voted in my election, and I won by 78 votes, about 0.24%. And every vote matters. Every vote matters so very, very much. So that's my first message. My next message is really, when it comes to being innovative, is business decisions based upon what you see there. We've gotten evidence to make decisions when it comes to public policy, and that's not a partisan statement, right? Could you imagine minimum wage? And as part of our debate on minimum wage, should be, what is the evidence that is out there that's been studied that is coming from a nonpartisan, which would look at the impact of minimum wage on people, would look at the impact of minimum wage on businesses, and from that would say, okay, here's the reasons why we should or should not raise the minimum wage. And from that, then you could have real debate about how do you decide what is the best public policy to put forth. One of the things that I try to do in my time so far in the last 4.5, 5 years as a member of the legislature is to use and be dependent upon evidence and data to make all the decisions that I do. And then the last thing that I wanted to just bring up in terms of innovation is innovation, business, and economic activity. New Jersey is known for its innovation. You may think about Silicon Valley and California when it comes to innovation, but New Jersey has this rich history of innovation that goes back, typically people point to Edison, people point to Tesla, people point to the creation of color television, people air conditioning, bubble wrap, whatever it might be. New Jersey is a place of innovation where 14 of the 20 largest pharmaceutical companies have headquarters in New Jersey. And innovation drives our economy forward. To give you some examples, when we went ahead as a country to decide to put people on the moon through the Apollo project, we spent billions of dollars, of public dollars. But for every dollar that we spent, we got about $7 back in economic activity. The return on investment was enormous. And this isn't just a one-off. This is pretty typical. For the Human Genome Project and unlocking the human genome, it was more than 100-to-1 return on investment. We see this over and over and over, that people who are innovative in business not only grow a business, not only create jobs, but that money goes back into the economy. And so, the last speaker talked a little bit about some of the negativity and some of the difficulties and the challenges that are around because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But one of the things that I work on is how can we put public policies in place to lower the barriers to job growth through innovation. And that is more important now than it's ever been. I've worked on this before the last 3, 4, 5 months, but it can never be more important. And how do we make sure that not only that we bring back businesses that have been just devastated by the virus, but how do we grow new businesses? And so that is sort of how I look at innovation. Innovation as a job creator, innovation as a way to make public policy in the sense of insisting and demanding that your elected officials at all levels use data to make the public policy decisions and vote for the public policies that they want to vote for, and innovation in risk-taking, and urging you each as you go forward to look at, when a door opens, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, are you willing to go through that door? Are you willing to take the risk? Because I think that is in the end what leaders do, is willing to take a risk, because part of what I've learned in science, which I think has served me well in politics, is that the vast majority of the time in science, you fail. You don't make discoveries each and every day in science. In fact, you rarely make discoveries. Science is little incremental steps forward. So often, your experiment doesn't work or doesn't produce anything groundbreaking. But from that, you learn that if you move steadily forward, that you look back at what you've accomplished and realize you've made progress. And that's the same thing that I think we need to do when it comes to public policy. And then the final thing, and then I'm happy to open it up to any questions you may have, is we are at a definitive moment in our country's history where it's not just simply the pandemic, but where there is a real looking inward at what type of society we want to have, where what do the terms racial justice, what does the term equality for all mean? What are we looking for our systems of healthcare, our systems of education, right? And our business systems? What are we looking for as we move forward? And so this will take innovation. This will take risk-taking. This will take evidence. And this is going to take people such as yourselves to transform what not just our businesses look like, but what our entire society looks like. And I'm very optimistic about what we have in front of us. So thank you for a few minutes to talk to you and share my thoughts on innovation and what it means for us. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. So we have a few questions here. The first question is, you talked a little bit about this, that when you take a risk, that sometimes you're going to fail. So what advice do you have for students that they fail on their first try? What advice do you have for them to get up and try again?
Yeah, so before I won my legislative victory by the narrowest of margins, I actually, for the state legislature, I ran for Congress the year before because I was really frustrated with what I was seeing in Washington, D.C. I'm still frustrated by what I see in Washington, D.C. And in that election, there were 4 people running. And I came in 4th out of 4, came in dead last. But I did so much better than I could have ever imagined. I did so much better than anyone else ever could have imagined. And I knew that my odds of winning, because I had no experience in politics, I had no name recognition, I raised very little money for communication advertising. I knew my odds were small. But I went in with the attitude that I was literally going to work harder than anyone else. And regardless of what happened, I was going to be proud of that. And so I think what happened there is I was very proud of the campaign that I ran, regardless that I lost. But it showed me that I could do this. And so while I may not have won, while I may have failed, quote unquote, I didn't look at it as a failure. And so I think it really is reminding yourself that nobody really gets it right every time. You know, baseball players are lucky to get a hit 3 out of 10 times. You know, businesses fail all the time. But the people who are successful, they don't take one failure as a sign of judging their self-worth. They just say just one step on the road. And I think that is it right there, is that it's about the journey. And so whatever you're doing, just know, you may fail this time, but there's just going to be another time, and you're just going to work hard.
Thank you. And we have another question here. What do you think that students should do to help to meet a changing world? How do you think they should adapt to a changing environment?
Do you mean changing environment? Do you mean climate change, or what do you mean when you say changing environment? I
know you're a science guy, but what I mean is like the environment changing around them, their situations changing, their situation changing. How do you think they should adapt to that?
I took it literally. I got you. You're right. I did take it to be climate change. Okay. One of the things that I think I've noticed over the last few months is I've had to have some really difficult, uncomfortable conversations. I'm a white male and have been granted an enormous amount of privilege based upon my gender and the color of my skin. And I have, again, taken a risk and put myself out there in terms of having conversations with people about really difficult things when it comes to biases, when it comes to prejudice, when it comes to equality. And so the world sure seems to me like it is changing rapidly. We don't know where it's going to go. And I think the question is for you is, personally, are you willing to be open to that? Are you willing to be open to change? That's often a difficult thing because, we get comfortable in our ways. That's sort of the cliche, especially an older person like me, right? I'm supposed to be set in my ways. Are you willing to be open, right? Open to being wrong, open to being challenged, open to being questioned. Doesn't mean that you are wrong. It just means, are you open to that? And I think if you are open to that, if you are open to when your first reaction is this can't be true, but maybe it is, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, then I think you are open to having conversations. It's the same thing. Are you open to having a conversation with someone who doesn't agree with you politically and listening, right? Why does that person have such a different point of view? Why do they think you're wrong? I think an openness to conversation and a willingness to discuss these things is the first step towards real transforming of everything that goes on around us.
All right, and here's a final question. Do you think that it's better to be disruptive and do something that's never been done before, or conform to the world around you?
Excuse me, is it better to be disruptive to, say it one more time?
So is it better to innovate, like be disruptive, start new things, or is it better to conform to the world around you?
Well, I mean, as you can tell in the few minutes that we're talking together, I haven't conformed very much at all. So I have I suppose, a bias there. But at the same time, you can't just be always disruptive. You can't just always be innovative, right? I mean, like I said before, what I see in science is you've got to push forward. And so I think the answer is, it's not, is it better or worse? I would reframe the question, which is, if given an opportunity to be disruptive and to be innovative, I would take it, because those opportunities don't come around that often. I didn't have, one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was trying to decide whether to run for Congress, knowing full well that the odds were small, was someone said to me, you will never have this opportunity again. Why not? All right? And so I think the ability to say, this is an opportunity to be disruptive and innovative, I'm going to take it, I'm going to go for it, is key. But in between that is a time to say, okay, I'm also, now I'm working on blank, whatever blank may mean, but I'm going to do it in a way that's mine, in a way that really is genuinely me, whatever that it might be. And so I think it is more, for me, about taking an opportunity when it presents itself, and building the experiences that you have in your day-to-day life, so that when that opportunity comes, you're ready to grab that and succeed.
All right, thank you. And I know I said final question, but we have another question here.
Sure.
How do you get people to get behind your ideas?
So I guess a couple of different ways. One of them is, hopefully, number one, Whatever I'm proposing is something that I already know that there is a large number of people who support. And so, it could be around global warming. I used that one before because that's what I thought the question was, right? But one of it is to start with people who I know already support it. And we got to go into the details and figure out if we have the details just right. The other one is what I've learned is that there are often people that I may not consider who would support me who would. But I need to talk to them about it, right? And we need to have a conversation because they may support a piece of what I'm proposing, but not necessarily everything that I'm working on at that particular moment, right? Not every piece of that legislation. So the question becomes, is that a deal breaker or not? And then the last thing I'd say is not everybody is going to support everything that I do or that you do. And that's okay. And those people, I'm willing to listen to them. But in the end, I'm not going to change my mind. I'll give you a quick story just to stir things up a little bit, which is vaccines. This is something, should we make vaccines mandatory? And while I'm not a doctor, people look at me as a scientist and want to come up and talk to me in the State House in Trenton when we're actually there all the time, who are against vaccines. And one of the things that I think is really important, you should know, number one, I am very much pro-vaccine. I'm on a bunch of legislation, et cetera. But I also think it's incredibly important to listen and talk and debate with people. In the end, I'm not changing my mind because I'm using the data I talked about before. But I want to see if at least I can get them behind me in any way, shape, or form. If they can't, then okay, we're never going to agree, and we move on. So it's a process.
All right. Thank you so much, Assemblyman, for all of your time, and we hope that you have a great weekend, a great rest of the month.
Thank you so much for having me. Good luck with the rest of the meeting. Take care. And I also say, if anybody ever wants any follow-up questions, you can find my email or find me on social media. Send me a message and I'll respond back to you.